Terrifier 3 is the latest film by director and writer Damien Leone. I believe I'm pronouncing his name right, and I do also believe that he does a lot of the practical gore effects, and we'll talk a bit more about that as the review goes on. So for this painting, I'm using a little bit more of an expanded palette just to be able to get all the colors that I need for it. I'm using titanium white, lemon yellow, cadmium red, burnt umber, cerulean blue, and French ultramarine blue. And as you see this paint develops, I think that this was the correct palette for this case. A lot of the light blues in the background of the house here needed those lighter blues to really shine through. If I were to try to pull the French ultramarine blue, it would look too muddy and be too desaturated, so I needed a brighter blue to start at its base to get those. Terrifier 3 opens up with an unrelated scene. We get a family a few days before Christmas, I believe, having their evening, settling down for the night. The daughter freaks out and believes that she hears Santa on the roof. The mother talks her down and tries to get her to calm down so that she can sleep at night, and in that promises that there are actually Santa's elves scouting the house so that Santa has a clear path. And as that progresses, the daughter gets into bed, and the mother promises milk and cookies for the elves and then goes lay down herself next to her dickhead of a husband, who you're actually end up being happy, I think, to see die. The daughter, still not convinced that it is not Santa, goes into her brother's room, older brother, I believe, and tries to wake him up to say, hey, come along here, Santa. She even sees the shadowy form of a Santa-like figure in the darkness rustling around the tree from their second story. And of course, Santa, it is not. It is actually our psychopathic, demonic murderer, Art the Clown, who is set on a murderous holiday rampage and dispenses death and destruction to this poor family. And in this opening scene, we see Terrifier 3 go places where most horror movies do not, in that Art the Clown openly kills a young boy by axe. You don't see the actual delivery of death. We know that Art the Clown walks into the room with an axe. We hear a struggle, and then we do see, to my surprise even, the gory aftermath, as we see a dismembered and departed 8-year-old boy, something like that. I'm not somebody who is a gore freak, a gore hound. It doesn't really do much for me to see these dismembered bodies. It doesn't really particularly excite me in any sort of way, but I'm also desensitized to it as somebody who watches a lot of horror movies, so it doesn't really disturb me as well. But I am surprised they were willing to go to that length, and it is a big opening statement for Terrifier 3 and what is to come later on. Will it live up to that level of grimness as the movie goes on is kind of the question that this scene starts us with. I'm going to jump back and talk a little bit about the other Terrifier films, in which I've seen all of them, including the short film that was in All Hallows Eve, I believe. I'm not a big fan of these films. I think Art the Clown is an interesting and worthy new horror icon, and David Howard Thornton plays him particularly well. He really embodies this character and makes him worth watching. But the films themselves don't entirely grab me. I didn't mind the short film, didn't mind the first movie, as they're very simple, straightforward slashers, which you can really see that it's just a modern take on the classic slasher genre, which is completely fine. In Terrifier 2, however, they really tried to explore this character's lore, give it a backstory, give it a reason for existing, and give us a protagonist to latch onto. And we'll talk more about Sienna as the review goes on. But Terrifier 2, I thought, was a boring mess, personally. At about 2.5 hours, it just was a slog of a film for me. I don't believe any slasher movie should be that long, even if you're going to add a bunch of lore. If the lore is inconsequential and you're not taking that extra time to establish the characters and make us care about what they're going through, then there's really no point in having that extended of a runtime for a film, in my opinion. I'm also of the mind that most movies don't need to be more than 90 minutes long. And I know that a lot of people don't agree with me on that. So after Terrifier 2, I wasn't really looking strongly towards Terrifier 3. I wasn't really all that interested. But 2024 being such a good year for horror movies, I just got wrapped up into the swing of things, into the momentum, that seeing Terrifier 3 seemed like it was something that I should do. Lights in the background. So after the presumed controversial opening, We are then brought into I believe, a mental facility where we see an old childhood favorite of mine, Chris Jericho, as the orderly or security guard or doctor. And the funny thing is like I loved Chris Jericho in WCW when I was a kid. That's how old I am. But he's now showing up in a lot of these medium to low budget horror movies. And actually, I think Terrifier 3 is probably not even low budget, all things considered, for a horror movie. But that said, you see Chris Jericho all the time pop up in these kind of movies, and especially in Kevin Smith movies for some reason. I know Kevin Smith has an obsession with Canada, and Chris Jericho being a Canadian, that may have something to do with it. I don't know. He is mugging throughout his scenes here. I know in a previous video I said that I actually really like big, broad, larger than life performances. But you can definitely tell when somebody who is a good actor is doing that versus somebody who is not a very good actor doing that. And I feel like Chris Jericho is the latter more than the former. But it is fun to see him. And then it is fun to see his goofy facial expressions get torn literally right off of his skull as his face is peeled back in a kind of funny, gory, horrific scene. After that, we are reintroduced to Sienna, who is being released from a mental health facility into the care of her uncle, I believe it is. Obviously, if we were to take seriously what happened in the previous film, Sienna would be deeply traumatized by the events that would happen, and makes complete sense that she would be in a mental health care facility. One thing that I thought was a lost opportunity or missed opportunity or something that just wasn't really developed all that well is that during the dinner scene, Sienna sees another victim of Art the Clown, who was a friend of hers, and is a representation of survivor's guilt, who's blaming her for being the one that is able to survive, is able to be there at dinner, which is something that seems like it could have been developed into something later on in the movie, could have come into play during a situation, but it doesn't really come up again. The only other time that something similar to that happens, if I'm remembering correct, is when Sienna is at a mall and believes she sees a vision of Art the Clown. And this doesn't work because it turns out that it was Art the Clown, but just her mental health was in question, and the people who are around her question what she sees as reality or not, when in reality it was Art the Clown, so she had reason to be concerned. It's kind of like a muddled thing that I think could have been ironed out a little bit to make a little bit more sense or to be more effective within the story. It's just something that just happens and doesn't really affect how she progresses as a character. And at that point, Art the Clown is at a mall who replaces a mall Santa who has gone on break and begins to have kids sit on his lap and tell them their birthday wishes. Art the Clown, if you've not seen the other Terrifier films, is a mime. So he doesn't talk. He's just very expressive, very goofy, making faces, mugging for the camera. Something that I think a kid would actually find amusing. But obviously he is a horrific, demonic serial killer. So the security discovers that Art the Clown is not the actual Santa Claus, and the real Santa Claus comes back in to replace him. They shoo off Art the Clown, and as he's leaving, a kid picks up a present that he had received from Art the Clown, opens it up, and of course there's a bomb in it, and blows up the kid and the surrounding area in a quite surprising scene. Once he grabbed the box, I thought there was going to be a bomb in it, but my experience with Terrifier and Art the Clown, he's mostly a kind of classic slasher. So them introducing guns and bombs in this movie, as well as other strange implements later on, it was kind of funny to see the bomb go off and take out the mall, basically. Oh, and I actually want to jump back because my favorite scene in the movie is the scene where we see Art the Clown get the Santa Claus costume for the first time. We are presented with two men sitting with a bartender right behind. Both of the men are longtime recognizable character actors. The guy dressed up as Santa, I don't know his name off the top of my head, and I'm sure I could look it up for this review, but I have seen him in a lot of things through the 90s and my childhood. So he's an actor that I have warm feeling towards, even though I don't know his name or anything about him, or I can't name a movie that he's been in. He's a guy that is just like, oh, that dude, that guy with that face. So it's a joy to see him. The other guy, of course, is B-movie legend, Star Trek legend, and a guy I just love seeing pop up in movies and seems to be popping up more and more in cameos lately. Clint Howard, who is a longtime veteran actor who has been acting longer than I've been alive and with any luck will continue to do so for years and years to come. It's always a joy to see Clint Howard in things. He is it's the Ice Cream Man himself. Come on, the Ice Cream Man. Everybody's favorite movie, The Ice Cream Man. The Ice Cream Man, Platinum awarded Ice Cream Man, one of the greatest horror movies ever made. The reason why I like this scene is that you are seeing this through more of the characters at the bar's eyes. Art the Clown comes in with a garbage bag over the shoulder filled with God knows what. I assume stinking, because he just looks like he stinks. Even when he's not covered in blood, when you see Art the Clown, I imagine that he stinks. It might just be me. So he approaches the bar, and the bartender is almost from moment one is like, get this guy out of here. But the Santa Claus, who is in the holiday spirit, he sees Art the Clown as a kindred child entertainer dress up guy. So he dressed up as Santa Claus and Art the Clown dressed up as a clown. Has this, oh, you know what, let's let this guy in. We're just having fun. He's, one of us, that sort of thing. As the scene progresses, Art the Clown's behavior and attitude is obviously very strange, and the bartender is unsettled and is always one moment from just kicking him out. They all order drinks. The bartender asks for a card, looking for any reason to kick this clown out. Out of his bag, Art the Clown presents a card that is obviously not him, it's somebody else, but he's dressed up in paint and all of that. And then the Santa Claus offers his lap to Art the Clown and asks him what he would like for Christmas. And at that moment, Art the Clown pisses on him, and the bar gets swept up in a bit of chaos because a presumably grown man pissed on another grown man's leg. The tension builds and builds. Everybody's upset. Everybody's getting to a point where they want to do something about Art the Clown. The tension is built up to this moment, and I just thought it was hilarious. Out of his bag, Art the Clown just pulls out a gun and starts blasting. After all the tension built up, Art the Clown pulling out a gun and shooting the bartender and Clint Howard was the perfect climax to that segment of the movie. It was hilarious to me. Of course, right after, we then get a scene of Art the Clown brutally torturing the Santa Claus. For all the gore porn addicts out there, they get what they want out of it too. But the building tension, the focus on how the characters feel in that moment, and the payoff makes it the best scene in the entire movie, and legitimately fun scene. I actually really enjoyed it. So Art the Clown creates a bunch of havoc and panic all across Miles County, I believe is the area. They actually call him the Miles County Clown. We get interesting ideas where Jonathan, Sienna's brother, is at college. He befriends a guy whose girlfriend does a horror podcast and then wants to interview Jonathan and Sienna for their podcast to get an inside scoop about the horrific things Art the Clown had done in the previous movie. It doesn't really go anywhere, but it's actually somewhat interesting background stuff. I've gotten deeper into it and making some kind of commentary about people's disgusting interest in real life death and destruction. You can see them leading in that direction, but they don't quite go there all the way. I don't necessarily think it's a complete missed opportunity like the other stuff is, because it really is just more background character stuff. But it was kind of an interesting idea that they could have gone deeper into. And the demonic stuff that was introduced in the second movie is brought back into this one, where we see those flashback scenes with Sienna and her father discussing the female hero. Comes back and is not really explored with any more depth, but it's just reintroduced the powerful sword that can slay the demon, that stuff. All that is reintroduced, but it's not really explored any further than had been before. There is really cool stuff through imagery in this, where we see this demonic blacksmith who's working on a horrific forge in a vision that Sienna has. And the demonic blacksmith is being chained to this angelic, creepy, statuesque figure. Really cool looking. Like, that scene visually is really awesome, and actually would have been a fun one to paint too, but I went with more recognizable Art the Clown in the Santa gear, just because it's more representative of this movie overall. But if they were to decide to make a movie that goes into the full demonology of it and makes a specific story about it instead of just having it being background, that would be pretty interesting. That might be a good direction for the Terrifier series to go. The climax is a big bloody spectacle wherein Victoria and Art the Clown try to convince Sienna to be his new host, I guess it is. It seems like Art the Clown is always tied to a female host that allows him to be materialized on this earthly plane. And you have to commend Damien Leone on how creative he gets with the death and destruction that Art the Clown and his host wreaks across the poor people that live in these movies. He really goes to a level that you don't see in other things. A lot of creativity, a lot of splooshy, splashy blood, and horrible gore, which looks excellent, by the way. I believe all the gore effects are done practically, and they're about as good as gore effects have ever looked. It's funny, we get a cameo from Tom Savini in it, and this is definitely from the school of Tom Savini's horror gore effects, where it's very realistic, it's very bloody, splashy, splooshy, wet, and visceral. If there's nothing funny or off looking about the actual gore effects, they kind of keep the funny stuff to Art the Clown himself. And speaking of Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton is fantastic in this role. I'm not the biggest fan of these movies, but his performance as Art the Clown is iconic for a reason. He is really excellent. I think that Art the Clown is the perfect horror villain for Gen Z. If you spend any time on TikTok, which I try not to, I mostly just post there, but if you spend any time there, you see a lot of the meta irony of this thing is awful, but I'm dancing to it. This thing is gross, but I'm making a dumb joke about it. It just kind of permeates what Gen Z is right now. And I think Art the Clown embodies that completely in that he is a little goofball that does horrific things. He is prime for people in their early to mid 20s to love, I think. He wouldn't be out of place as a cartoon character that you would see in SpongeBob SquarePants. So I think that generation of people is tuned to loving Art the Clown, and you will see it all over the place. One thing that I can't help but to think about when I watch these movies is where do they go at this point? Art the Clown has become the protagonist of these movies where we see most of it from his perspective. And I think that limits the kind of movie that this can be. And I feel like they have to go in maybe one of two directions or stay the course of where they are. But as I'd mentioned earlier, it'd be interesting to see it go fully into the demonic world and explore the true origins behind this character and what he is capable of, and really the mechanisms of that world and how he has come to be, and maybe shed a bit more of the human aspect or minimize it, or you pivot it completely to the other direction where we see the movie almost entirely through the eyes of the human character, the protagonist, and have Art the Clown be a more classic slasher villain who's doing his killing on the fringes and eventually meets, in a way, try to make Art the Clown more scary than goofy. Or they can continue how things are, of course, and try to balance their goofy, funny Art the Clown stuff versus the humans going through a horrible situation. But I feel like they're going to continue to stumble with that because you never quite get to the level of caring about the human characters that makes them matter, that makes you not want to see them die, versus Art the Clown's goofy hijinks. So I think there needs to be some type of change for the series to progress in a way that is satisfying. But of course, as long as these movies make money as the way they are, they'll continue to make them the same way. And honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. Just as a person who likes to see things progress, I like seeing the art side of storytelling and movie making. It would be interesting to see them go different places with it, but they're paying bills, making something fun. I can't be mad at them. So, in conclusion, I actually liked Terrifier 3 more than I liked Terrifier 2. It was enjoyable overall. It was a bit long, but didn't completely overstay its welcome for me. It was shorter than the second one. Out of my bronze, silver, gold, platinum ranking, I would put Terrifier 3 at a bronze as a very enjoyable, fun movie to watch, but one that didn't quite grab me all the way. And there's a lot of room for improvement, but the gore and the spectacle and just out of nowhere, shocking, fun moments, this movie has in spades and is worth watching for those reasons. So feel free to tell me what you thought about Terrifier 3. Tell me what you thought I may have gotten wrong. Tell me what you think of my painting right here, finished. Tell me what movies you'd like to see me review next. And also, one more thing, I'd like to acknowledge the death of David Lynch, whereas I wouldn't consider his movies outright horror. They have the feeling of horror and definitely are worth talking about and worth watching. When I had started planning to do this series and just thinking about the types of movies I would review and the types of movies I'd be painting, it had occurred to me that I would be painting a lot of monsters, a lot of men, a lot of gore. And so I was brainstorming on things where I can paint women, paint beautiful scenes, paint things a little bit different while still reviewing horror. And one of the first things that came to mind was Fire Walk with Me, Twin Peaks movie. And at the very end, we see Laura Palmer crying. That was the scene that I had envisioned painting. And due to the death of David Lynch, I'm now considering just bumping that up and that being the next review I do. So yeah, expect to see a Fire Walk with Me painting here sometime soon. My goal with this channel is to put about 2 videos like this out a month where I paint and do a full review. I will, however, try to do some smaller videos in between, as well as some shorts, as I've already posted a couple of those as well. Keep the ball rolling. I actually enjoy doing this quite a lot, despite not getting many views. It's just something that I'm having fun doing right now and will continue to do. So if you are interested in seeing more of those, please like and share my videos. Commenting, I hear, helps as well. I'm at The Masked Tattooer on most social media platforms, or you can see my tattooing art and my other art as well. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.